So it is officially 5 o'clock. So let's get started. Welcome to those of you that are here and to those of you that will listen to this recording at some point in the future because the recording will be posted. I'm Rebecca Weston from the Camino Calls, and I am here with my first ever Substack Live guest, Tim Wasilowski. And apologies if I didn't say that correctly, Tim.
It was perfect.
Okay, great. And Tim just came back in April from his first walk on a Camino de Santiago route. He started in Tui in Portugal, or sorry, in Spain, which is right at the Spanish-Portuguese border. And he walked about a week into Santiago de Compostela. And we've got a few things that we're going to discuss about that walk. So welcome, Tim. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Rebecca, glad to be here.
All right. So my first question for you, Tim, is tell us a little bit about how you heard about the Camino and what made you want to do it, and specifically when you did, because a lot of people hear about it and they think, oh, I'm going to do it at some point in the future. I'll do it next year. What made you, first of all, how did you hear about it, and how did you decide, okay, I'm going to do it now?
The first time that I heard about it was actually from that movie, The Way. And I suspect a lot of people are the same way. So I actually saw it in the theater, and that was 15 years ago or something like that. It was a long time ago. And I've always wanted to do something really big physically in my life. And I'm not quite sure what that was. It was like biking halfway across the country or walking across the state or canoeing down the Mississippi or something. And I've always wanted to do something big. And life kind of gets in the way of things. I've got 2 kids, a career where I was traveling a lot. So time and life just gets in the way. And I heard about the Camino again, and I started looking into it. And I thought, at the tender age of 67, what am I waiting for? And I started to dig into it, got more serious about it, and then went from there.
Cool. And dug into it, got more serious about it, and how did you dig into it? What were some of the things that you did to kind of move from idea into actually making it happen?
And one of the big things is I'm an over preparer. So I am not somebody that just jumps in the car and I'm not figuring out where I'm going and just go. I need to prepare. And then I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we've got a college for old people here, online college for people of my age, called Ollie, and I know that's available in other colleges as well. And this very responsible, smart, experienced person named Rebecca actually taught that class, and I got
I did.
into the class, and it was, if I recall, it was about half a dozen different classes. Each covered a specific topic on the Camino.
Yeah.
So that really got my interest. There were probably 2 dozen or so of us, I guess,
Hmm.
Zooming,
Hmm.
you from Spain and us from kind of all over the place. And that's kind of how it came back into my consciousness. And then I started to get excited about it from there.
Cool. And another question I had for you, Tim, I know initially you were thinking of going with someone else, but then you ended up deciding to go on your own. Can you tell us a little bit about the initial thought around that and then how you came to end up deciding to go on your own? How'd that come
Sure.
about?
Sure. So, um, it's actually pretty complicated for me anyway, going through this process, because I have to find somebody that, one, is interested in going. That's not everybody that I know. Two, they have the time. Three, they have the money. And four, they have the physicality. Right? So it took me really from January 1 till the mid of part of April to get physically ready for this. And then maybe the most important thing of all is somebody I wanted to spend 24/7 with. And by the time I went through that, all those funnels, it came to exactly the null set, or zero.
Mhm.
And just because you love somebody, just because you're friends with somebody, does not mean you should go on the Camino with them. And I would say, especially because there are times when things get a little bit dicey or you're not quite sure what to do. And hanging out with somebody and having a beer and having fun is one thing. But when the chips are down and you got to make a decision and you're both grumpy because you're hungry and you're tired, that's something else. So by the time I went through all that funnel, I was left with me, myself, and I don't regret that decision at all. The Camino was a very social event. I was able to chat up people really kind of all day, every day, as much as I wanted to, and so I went on this by myself and had a fabulous time.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you alluded a little bit to your physical training, so I want to go there next. What did you do to physically prepare? Well, first of all, tell us how many days did you actually walk, um, and what did you do to physically prepare for that?
So my trip was 120 kilometers or 75 miles, as you said, sort of straight north from Tui, right on the border, to the end. And I went a total of 9 days, and those were 8 walking days. So I had 1 day completely off. And I think when I initially kind of conceptualized this, I thought I would do like 10 miles, and the third day, you know, take a day off or have a short day and kind of get into a rhythm like that. So it was important that I was able to go about 10 miles. And what did I do? I just started walking. So I was in pretty good physical shape before then, but there's no amount of treadmill walking is going to help. Okay, there's no weights, there's no elliptical machines. It's just slapping on your shoes and hitting the pavement. And I did that probably 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. And it was getting to the point, there's a wonderful trail just south of Asheville here where you can go 4 miles, and then there's a little cafe there. So you can sit down, get a sandwich, get a drink, walk 4 miles back. The next thing you know, that's 8 miles.
Hmm.
Right. And then you go half a mile longer on one end, half a mile longer on the other end. That's 9 miles. So I did that very regularly. And then I also, hiked in the neighborhood. I hiked on some of the trails around here. And one thing that I was like surprised with the most is how many kind of different surfaces there were that I was walking on.
Mm.
So I was
You mean
walking on
surprised when you were on the Camino?
when I was on the Camino, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm walking on, you know, pavement. I'm walking on cobblestone. I'm walking on dirt. I'm walking on gravel. Up a creek bed actually at one point with
Yep.
water flowing down. So doing that, walking that I did in various areas really helped a lot.
Got it. I have my guest next week. She said the first thing she tells people about the Camino is that you will walk on rocks of every possible size, from tiny little gravel to boulders to things you're like, yeah. And I even remember specific sections where the rocks are actually like they're like this next to each other, like vertical rocks. And I'm like, wait, how does this even exist? I'm not a geologist, but it's not easy to walk on. So yeah, you do walk on every type of surface possible. So you did a lot of training with walking, and would you recommend to people like so? Some people are concerned about. Well, usually what I tell people is, you can walk 10 miles a day, and that's great. But on the Camino, you then have to get up and walk 10 or 12 or 15 miles the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. So, did you do some back to back training, or were you giving yourself days in between?
I should have done more of that, right? So you told me that as I was preparing. I remember you saying that from the class. And just like life gets in the way of that. That's a
Yeah.
great theory, and life gets in the way. And so I'm going to be honest, and I would say I probably did it two, possibly three times from
Mhm.
January 1 through mid-April when I left. But you're absolutely right. It's important to be able to go, to do it again, and
Yeah.
I had that structured like long walk, short walk. And that kind of gave me something to look forward to that short day. And I think that helped a lot.
Got it. Got it. Great. And so what were some of the concerns you had before you took off on your Camino?
We don't have enough time to go through my list of concerns. Okay. I'm a planner. And so like everything was a concern. And so what do I wear? How are my feet going to hold up? like literally everything. And I went from being unsure and not confident at all through the knowledge that I had working with you, of gaining that knowledge, getting prepared, and then becoming more confident. And and I'll talk a little bit more about this maybe later. Is like I should have trusted the process a little more to enjoy it in real time. Um, but it was that, I had a zillion questions and a zillion questions were answered. And so what I found out that did was really give me confidence to go forward.
Gotcha. Well, talk a little bit about that. What do you mean about trusting the process? Um,
Basically, believe everything you said. Um, in the class and in the one-on-one sessions that we did, because I can say when I did this, there's not one thing I would change in terms of packing something differently, wearing different shoes. Um, all of that preparation that I got was 100% on the money. And I burned a lot of mental calories wondering how in the world is my bag going to get from this hotel, this Airbnb that I'm in, to the next one. So I had, of course, reservations everywhere along the line. Together, we found this place that would move my bag from one place to the other. I had an air tag in it. But, you know, many times during my walk, is my bag really going to make it or not? And you know what? It did. And
yep.
how am I going to get into this next Airbnb? Do I have the code to get in the door? Well, I did. Um, you know, I wasn't really counting on the power going out in two countries when I was there. I was there
That's
and
right.
power went out. So that added a little bit of fun. So I might add, flashlight to my list of things that I would bring next time just for that. And
I've
maybe,
lived here for 4 years. That's the only time the power's gone out, Tim. So,
yeah, yeah. So it was really kind of everything is the answer to your question. It was, knowledge preparation for me, knowledge plus preparation equals confidence. And then when I had the confidence, I was ready to go.
got it, got it. And just because you brought it up, I do want to talk about the bag transfer because that is definitely a concern for a lot of people. The people I mostly work with are over 45, more a lot of times over 55 or 65, who are staying in hotels and going to have their bags sent. And I will say, the first time I did a Camino with my father, was not my first Camino. I had done a few before that. He was, and actually another one I did with another friend, people are just stunned that the bag shows up every
Right.
single time. I think my father, our first Camino, we were together for 7 days, and every single time we got to our room, he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's here." And I'm like, "How many more days do we have to do this before you realize the service works?" And he's like, "'Cause this would never work in the United States." I'm like, "Okay, we're not there." So,
And
but
I will
yeah,
just say, comment wait, to add to what you said, it's like staying in hotels. Okay. So there were only two places I stayed that actually had a front desk and somebody to answer questions. Otherwise, I was using a keypad on an Airbnb type thing. And then, of course,
mhm,
I'm like, how in the world is this guy going to come in and get my bag? Well, they do this and they work with these Airbnb owners, so they have the codes.
mhm.
And so trusting the process, I think, would have lowered my anxiety a bit and allowed me to live in the moment some more.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm another reason I'm glad you're here because hopefully people hear that and they're like, "Okay, I can remember that it does work." And I also tell people with the baggage services for transporting and people say, "Are they safe?" and all that kind of stuff. And I usually tell people, I mean, don't put your life savings in your bag. But yeah, it does work. And the thing is, there's a lot of companies that are doing this on the various Camino routes. And so if there were any problems at all, and word got out, they would be out of business. So it's their business to make sure your bag gets to where it needs to go because that's what they do. And they do know how to do it. And like you said, they do have these connections with the various accommodations about how to get your bag into the place. And that was another thing that always stuns people, that not only does your bag get there, but it will be in the room or behind the
Exactly.
door
Right.
of an apartment or Um, so I want to get to uh, the accommodations. Let's talk about accommodations there, because a lot of the people I work with are not interested in staying in hostels and rooms with 20 other people. Totally fine. There's lots of information out there about how to do the whole hostel thing on the Camino, but I find that there's not as much information about the other options. You do not have to stay in hostels. Um, However, you're not going to find a Hilton everywhere you go. So tell us a little bit about your accommodations.
So I did not stay in a hostel. That was totally off the table. That was never going to happen. And so I stayed in actually two nice places. And the rest of them were Airbnbs. Two nice things we would call hotels, really. One of them was a Parador that had a front desk. It was this Parador is a thing that's owned by the government. It used to be a monastery, and they've turned it into a hotel. And it was lovely. And that was a great experience. I also stayed on my day off. I stayed in this place that was kind of a resort, actually. And that was a lovely recharging experience. Other than that, I was really in, we'll just call them Airbnbs. So these were apartments, two-bedroom apartments with its own door and a keypad to get in. And they were all, I never had any issues getting in. I was able to text with the Airbnb owner. Everything worked fine. I will say that it got fatiguing for me, like walking into a new place every day, and it was always the first inning, right? Where are the lights? Uh, how does the shower work? What's the bathroom? Where's this? Where's that? I also do yoga every day to stretch out. And after a 13-mile walk, my body needs stretching. And so on stone floors in small Airbnbs, that was sometimes a challenge. Um, but they were all clean. They were all fine. Uh, you know, one place said that it had a washer and dryer, which I was so excited about. I looked at this thing. That means it's one unit. There's one box with this thing that you open. You throw it in there. You put some detergent in it. You push some buttons in Spanish. Say a prayer, and 2.5 hours later, my stuff came out dry and clean. I'm still not quite sure how that worked, but it did, and I was anxious that I was gonna just have this big glob of wet stuff in there that I would throw away and run with. So, how do you make coffee in the morning every day, right? So it was always the first inning, and you would not believe how many different kind of coffee makers there are in the world, right? And they're all in Spanish, of course, and I have better than average tourist Spanish, but it wasn't always sufficient to figure out the coffee machine.
Okay. I will say, I do know quite a bit about coffee machines, only because my husband is a coffee connoisseur. And I think in the 12 years I've known him, I think he's had like 20 different coffee machines that I have seen. So yes, but I do understand entirely. And the washer dryer combination, very interesting, because I've seen those, and you're the first person I've met. So whatever you did, you did something really well, and we're all going to want to know, because you're the first person I met who said my clothes actually came out dry. Um, I still tell people you need a washer and you need a dryer, and they don't really have a lot of dryers here in Spain. If it's together, I haven't figured out yet how to make it completely dry. So good for you.
And when I packed, I did not plan on washing out my socks and underwear and hanging them up at night. Okay, that was not going to happen. So, I had 9 pairs of everything. So, if I were carrying this on my back, I might have reconsidered. But the fact that it was my gym bag was being shipped, I gave myself that allowance to be able to do that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And I that's also a good thing to note, is that there are some places you stay where they are, not you specifically, but along the Camino, where they will offer a laundry service for a fee. They will wash and dry your clothes. Um, but you can't necessarily predict that that's going to happen everywhere.
Right.
So if you're going to be gone for a longer period of time, you need to kind of plan accordingly. To what extent are you going to be okay with having to wash something in a sink once in a while, or spend an afternoon in a laundromat versus, finding out which of your accommodations do have some sort of laundry service available. So every which way on that.
Right. Right.
Um, so let's see here. What Let's see here. So next question, you've talked a bit, and I think you've alluded to this, so I'll just say that too, that you and I had a class that I taught about the Camino de Santiago, and then we worked together one-on-one. What are some of the things that kind of surprised you about, if you can think of any of those? You talked about the washing machine, the coffee, all those kinds of things, but anything in general, otherwise, that surprised you about the Camino that our viewers might like to know about?
It was more social than I thought it was gonna be. And, of course, I should have listened to Rebecca during that, who said that was the case, but people were all super chatty and super friendly. So I had, dozens of lovely 15-minute conversations with people, and then, we kind of went our separate ways. I was not the fastest walker. So, when I'm walking next to, I remember this, 30-year-old Dutch woman with legs that are, 10 feet long. She's just going faster than me, right? So we had a nice little chat, and I said, I don't want to slow you down. I've enjoyed our conversation. And then she was just off like a bullet. Um, so it was more social than I thought. It was more uh, the infrastructure around the Camino was better than I kind of thought, and that's kind of getting to this trusting the process with the Airbnb and the bag exchange and all of that. That was all kind of better than I thought as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. And I should say at this point, if any of you that are listening have questions that you would like Tim or me to answer, feel free to type them in the chat. And this is my first Substack Live and Tim's as well. So hopefully we'll be able to see those and answer those. And if you've already put one in, type it in again because I haven't seen it at this point. But yeah, the socialness of the Camino, I will say it does depend on which route you're on and when you're on it. But the Camino Portuguese is the second most popular route of all the Camino routes for those people that are arriving in Santiago. The Camino Frances being the most popular route, to the point that more people now are not walking the Camino Frances. They're looking for other options
Mm.
because they feel like that one could get a little overwhelming. Um, you went in April, and I would say that probably the numbers they increase as you get into May and June. Did you feel like it was kind of like a parade, or do you feel like you still had time for solitude if you wanted it?
No, so I went at the absolute perfect time. So I went the last 2 weeks of April, and it rained hard for 4 days prior to when I went. So I went I started walking the Tuesday after Easter, and it rained from Wednesday to Easter Monday hard. And so when I left Tui, there were many people that had started in Porto, right, to make it
Mhm.
longer. They were all miserable, right? I remember talking to some woman who said that she was just sobbing for 2 straight days.
Oh, no. My goodness.
And and then when I went, I didn't have a drop of rain. 2 hours after I arrived, it started drizzling, so I didn't have one drop of rain at all. So I would say the weather was perfect, and there were always time. There was never a time when there was nobody around me. Okay, and there was never a time that it was like being in an airport. So there were always like, look ahead, there's half a dozen people up there. Look behind, there's half a dozen people behind me. So I would say it was solitude from the standpoint there's nobody shoulder to shoulder. So as I was working on, repeating my intention and doing some other things like that along the way, uh, I was never bothered by anybody. And I never felt unsafe, for sure, and there were plenty of single women walking, tons of, groups of 2 or more women that were walking, and nobody I talked with folks, and nobody had any issues with feeling unsecure or unsafe there.
Yeah. There is something that for those of you that don't know, I live in Spain on one of the Camino routes, and those of us that live here, specifically a lot of us from the U.S., have, and I shouldn't say it's not a joke per se, but like when people ask about safety over here, we always say, "Oh, they must be American." Because, as sad as it is to say, but I mean, it is in general. And I thank you for pointing out, like, you talk to single women, and because I'm always concerned, not concerned, but whenever a guy says, "Oh yeah, it's perfectly safe," I'm like, okay,
Right.
find me a single woman who did it, who will tell me that it's safe. And there are a lot of single women that do the Camino. You are absolutely correct. I've done half of my Caminos on my own, and one of them was actually a much quieter route that not a lot of people walk. And I think I met a dozen people the whole time, but about two or three of them were men over about 65 who I felt like kind of wanted to make sure I was going to be okay. Like, they were always aware of where I was. Like, they'd ask, "Do you want to walk together?" I'd be like, "Oh no, I'm fine." And so they would go ahead, but then I'd see them sitting up at a bar waiting for me. "Oh, how you doing?" "Good." So it is a really nice community. Did you have a sense of a community along the Camino when you were doing it?
Yes, absolutely. So there were several groups that I was with that, I would get to the bar first, or they would get to the bar first, or the place for lunch, and then we would meet up for most of a day. And I mentioned that I was in Spain when the power went off. So the power went off for me where I was about 1:30 in the afternoon and didn't come on till 7 in the morning. So as the
Okay.
sun was going down, like as soon as it went out, the first thought in my mind was, um, when do the riots start? And when do they start terror, breaking into the stores? Am I safe? And then, like, as soon as it got dark, like, the wine came out, right? People were sitting out in the street on the tables enjoying wine. So it's a completely different experience.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I live here, so for the power outage, the same thing. I didn't even know it was out for a while because I was just in a park, and, and then those stoplights were out, the pedestrian crossings were out, but everyone was so civil. Like, everyone was just, the cars will let the pedestrians go, and then the pedestrians would stop and let nobody was yelling. It was incredible to witness, and that's before I even knew that it had affected, two and a little bit more countries, because part of France was also affected. And exactly that. I would say that, and a lot of people wrote about this experience of how chill everyone seemed to be about the whole thing. It was just like, okay, it'll get fixed, but for now, and thankfully it was also a beautiful day. I don't know
It
if it
was.
was where you
Yes,
were.
yeah, it
Yeah.
totally
So
was.
it was a great day to be out and just enjoy the fact that, okay, no power, and it'll come back eventually.
And nobody
Um,
was beeping their horn. So, your beeping your
no.
horn does not help the power come back on for those that think it might. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just a stunning thing. I kept, thinking that too. Man, if this happened in the US, it would not be handled this civilly, or if that's a word, in this way. So yeah, Diana's saying, yeah, people, act more like adults. And again, I'm American. I mean, it's how I grew up. I get it. I mean, when something goes wrong, I'm like, okay, it needs to get fixed. But it is a big adjustment, though, to be in this country and to recognize that yeah, the priorities are not necessarily the same thing that you think the priorities
Right.
are.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about, to that end, because some people are surprised by the timing, that when you get into a town, usually if you're getting in between 2 and 5, everything's closed. Um, so did the schedule, the hours of how things operate here in Spain affect you at all?
Yes. So that's something I didn't really figure out until later on, despite the fact that you said that 50 times. Okay.
I
So,
promise people I did not coach him on all of this.
no, it took me a while to get into the rhythm. So I would generally, when I started walking, it was about 9 o'clock, it was 45 degrees. Um, and then by the end of the day, it was 65 degrees. So my walk was generally, 9 in the morning until 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon. And so what did too many times was, and I was stopping every couple hours for a drink or to sit down or a coffee or whatever. I would arrive in this town starving, and of course everything's closed. And I'd walk 13 miles. I'm tired. All I want to do is take a shower and sit on the couch. Um, the last thing I want to do is sightsee or wander around this town for a cute little, the perfect bistro. Um, so too many times that happened to me. And then I kind of figured out, well, I need to eat, even though I'm not hungry, I need to eat my lunch at around noon or so before I get to where I'm going. And then,
Okay.
get where I'm going. And a lot of these places didn't open again till 7:30 p.m. or so. And, and of course they go till 11 at night or midnight or something like that. So, and I had snacks with me and all that, but that just really didn't cut it. So you told me that. I knew that. I know the hours are different, but I still didn't program that, appropriately for probably the first 4 days or so. I'm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's what yeah, it's good to have some backup snacks with you, but I get what you're saying. After walking 12 miles, like you don't want a snack, you want to sit down to a meal.
right.
And that's why I tell people you need to learn about the menu del dia and how that works in Spain at our midday, which midday here in Spain is lunch is between 1:30 and 4:30.
Right.
Um, Usually if you sit down by 4, you'll be good. And yeah, and that's the big meal of the day here. So I'll reiterate it now for those that are listening that are potentially thinking of doing a Camino, um, that when I get into town, my first priority is sitting down to a nice menu del dia because I need to eat, and I know that that's when they're open. So yeah. So we have just about 15 minutes left. So I'll just also say once more that if anybody has any questions specifically about walking a Camino de Santiago, for us, feel free to throw those into the chat. But I have another question for you, Tim. Here, looking back on your whole process, and you've talked a little bit about this, but from the idea of doing it to actually doing it to coming back. Any other advice or things that you would want people to know about walking the Camino de Santiago?
I would say setting an intention is important. And I heard about that, but I didn't quite understand what it meant. And it kind of percolated in me from January through mid-April when I started. So my intention kind of changed a couple of times when I went, and then I ended up adding another one about halfway through as well. So, the Camino can be spiritual for people, it can be religious, and it can not be. And I was probably somewhere in the middle of all of that, but I definitely had, an intention that I did, and I think that was, very helpful to me, as I went through this process.
Mhm. And helpful in what way?
Um, it gave me a purpose,
Mm,
was part of it. And I didn't listen to music really. When I'm walking here in North Carolina, I have got a podcast on, I've got music on, I'm talking on the phone, I am something. The last thing I need is to actually listen to what's in my brain when I'm here. That can be kind of scary. And that was not the case on the Camino. I only listened to one song, and it ended up shockingly very strange song, being my psych song in the morning, which is "Feeling Groovy" by Simon and Garfunkel. Because I wasn't always feeling groovy, and I thought this might kind of get me psyched up to do it. So it did, but I was not listening to music, and this. Gave my brain something to chew on as I was going and a bit of a purpose as well.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I've always had I don't know if you'd call it an intention. I've always had a reason or something I wanted to think about on every Camino that I've done. Um, some of them I've shared, some of them I haven't because it's just, personal to me. But I agree with you. It's rare do you have that much time to be quiet with yourself if you want to be. And I'm the same as you. I did not plug in music or podcasts or anything else. There's something, and people can and people do, and that's totally fine. You can do the Camino however you like, which is one of the things I love about it. But yeah, for me, it was pretty cool to be able to just walk through a country and really feel and experience whatever was around me. I felt much more in touch with um, the sounds, the sights, the feelings, and all of that than I probably do in my day to day life. I'm imagining you probably had a similar experience.
Oh, absolutely. When I have my earbuds on, listening to a political podcast, get my blood boiling here. I'm not hearing the birds. I'm not looking at the animals that are around here. And I live in the mountains here, so it's a beautiful place to go. So it was a completely different experience.
Definitely, definitely. And so the anything else, anything that you wish you had known ahead of time? I know we've talked a little bit about some of these things, but anything else you want to add about things you wish you had known?
I wish I kind of would have had. I sort of knew to do this, but I didn't implement it as well as I should have. So I felt that I was as prepared as I could possibly be because of working with you. And again, there was literally nothing. Oh, I wish I would have had this band-aid. I wish I would have had this. There was literally none of that. Flashlight would have been nice. But I, and I know to live in the moment. Um, and I don't always do the best job at that. So that's something that I would, wish I would have done differently as I went, is to live in the moment more. And that would really allow me to enjoy the experience. I will say there were several mornings about 5 o'clock when I woke up and thought, what in the hell am I doing here? I'm, I'm in a place, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm hungry. What am I doing again? And so those feelings went away. I kicked in my Feeling Groovy psych song, all good. And then by 9:15, I was just humming and whistling along, going down the road. But
Awesome.
I, confident preparation and confidence lets me um, enjoy things more. And I wish I would have been able to let go.
Mhm.
I did a pretty good job of it. I give myself a B on it. And I'm an easy grader though for me. Um, but I could have done a better job of that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and n you have the experience you're gonna have. So and I feel like that's kind of a great lesson, life lesson, if I don't sound too, trite or anything. But yeah, like it's another thing I like about the Camino. Like you can what a great lesson. Thank you for sharing it with us. Like you can do all this preparation and be ready for anything, but you get to a point where you just have to kind of live in the moment,
Right.
and really take it in. So I really appreciate you sharing that sentiment with us for sure. Um,
One other
anything
thing that I found that was different than
Yeah.
I thought, uh, and I have better than average tourist Spanish. I've traveled in Spain and throughout Central and South America. The Spaniards have lots and lots of words that really mean ham and cheese sandwich in some various form. So it's almost like Mexican food. Mexican food has about five of the same ingredients, and it's either a tortilla or a taco or a burrito or something. And it sure seemed like, unless I was ordering the wrong things, it sure seemed like there were 50 different names for basically a ham and cheese sandwich. I was dying at the end of my trip, I was dying for some Thai food and some Indian food. So there were no ethnic restaurants anywhere, Asian restaurants on this at all. That was the
Yeah,
one thing
yeah,
I missed, to be honest.
and I will say it depends on the route you're on because if for those that do the Camino Frances and start, back in Pamplona, you go through Burgos, you go through Leon, and then you get to Santiago. And so, when I was doing my first Camino, my first couple, I was vegetarian. And so I was so excited to get to a big city because I'm like, oh, thank God there'll be vegetarian options. And so I totally get it. That's something um, certainly for folks to consider because yeah, the food situation here is definitely different. And for people that have very strict, And even not strict, you're not even saying strict, you're even just saying, "I want something other than ham and cheese." So, there are ways to get that, it's a matter of, figuring that out, and the menu del dia is one of them. But yeah, there's a lot of ham over here. It's quite a thing, absolutely. Okay, so we are almost up with our 45 minutes. We have about 5 minutes left. Um, so anything else you'd like to share with us, or if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask. And and of course, this is my first Substack Live, so I think I'm seeing all of the comments if there are any, but I'm not 100% sure. So, but yeah. So Tim, what would you say to somebody who's saying, "Yeah, I'm thinking of going on the Camino. I'm not really sure if it's for me." What would you offer?
Especially the person that says, "I can't. I'll go next year." Right. So I would say, what are you waiting for? Right. There's not anything's going to be better next year. You're going to be a year older. For some of us, that are in my age group, that's just, 10 more aches and pains from something that's going to happen in the next year. Um, go now. What the heck are you waiting for? And if you say it's not for me, then I would say do the research, right? And, again, you were just a tremendous help with me on this. And without your help and the research and what I learned from you, I might have thought this isn't for me.
Hmm,
But you
okay.
addressed all the concerns that I had, so therefore, there was no reason kinda not to go, right? So I wasn't gonna stay in a hostel, I wasn't gonna carry my backpack, there were things like that that I wasn't gonna do, and finally, like, all of those objections finally went away, and then there was left with, "What the hell am I waiting for?" So,
There you go.
uh, and it even got accelerated because I thought I was gonna go in the fall. I wasn't gonna go in the summer, I don't do well with heat, and then it got accelerated to the last 2 weeks of April, which were perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, and, I see Diane asked, "How did you find me?" And, yeah, Tim had mentioned that earlier. I taught a class, at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, an online class, and it's called OLLI, the abbreviation OLLI, and they're at different places around the US. And it's basically people teaching other people whatever their knowledge is. And so I offered a class on the Camino de Santiago, and that is how Tim and I initially met. So yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered everything.
Cool, cool. And I will say, Tim, I appreciate you mentioning that about, what are you waiting for as far as doing the Camino, because it's funny, I wrote one of my earlier posts about this. I had somebody there's a solar eclipse that's gonna hit Spain in 2026. I can't remember when exactly it is, but somebody, was saying to me, I'm trying to book a hotel, but I can't find anything. Are they already booked?" And I'm like, "No, they haven't opened their bookings yet. We don't do things in advance over here like in the US." Um, and that's something I've had to adjust to here in Spain too. I was working with a client recently who was waiting for the train schedules to come out. The train he needed, you couldn't book tickets. The tickets came out like 3 weeks before the train was supposed to go. And this was getting from like Madrid to Vigo. This was not some little tiny little train. So yeah, but back to your point of, what are you waiting for? It is definitely something. It's a big deal to do this physically for sure. And if you're at a certain point in your life, it's kind of like, maybe that other trip can wait because who
Right.
knows how you're going to be physically in order to do this one. So yeah, and I've also, and a lot of people I work with, when I initially work with them, will tell me, "Yeah, we're gonna do this in 26, we're gonna do that," and sometimes they'll come back and be like, "You know what? We've changed our mind. We're gonna do this sooner," which is great to hear, because I am certainly one of those people that says, if this is something you wanna do, I would highly recommend, if you can, doing it sooner rather than later. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us, and for those of you that joined us a little late, this conversation is being recorded, and I'll be able to post that in my newsletter and on thecaminocalls.substack.com. You can find anything that we talked about as far as anything. If I said I wrote about it, it's probably there on the Camino Calls. And next week I have another guest who was in her early 70s when she did her Camino from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France off to Santiago de Compostela, just about 500 miles. And so she's joining us next week at the same time. So looking forward to seeing you all then. Tim, I want to say thank you so very much for being the guinea pig for my first Substack Live. I very much appreciate it. And I hope you had as much of a wonderful time as I have had.
It was really fun. Buen Camino.
Hey, buen camino.